Hello, how have you been? Trust your day has been good and trust the month has been going great as well. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, yes, you've been able to relate to some of the videos we've made in the year. But if you're viewing this on Instagram, this is going to look like the first, do I say, video in the year 2026. So please, you can visit our YouTube channel and play catch up on videos that we have posted um, beginning of the year. All right. So one of the videos that we made early in this month, like I think when February started, was we tried to do a really, and I'll say very short, really brief review of books that we've related with, read some from December into January, and the review was so brief on each of the books. There were three of them, one of which is the book At Work by Pastor Dibola Dejikoromi. And so right now I'll be doing, I'll say, a bit more robust review on the book At Work. And here is why I think as believers we need to relate with this book, because some of us will look at our lives and will be like, I still do some things, and that makes it look as though I'm not a Christian. The truth is you are a Christian, but there's just still areas of carnality that needs to be addressed, because when we're not aware of it, ignorance is really not an excuse. It doesn't excuse us from the consequences that follows these things. So that's why you want to read this book. You want to also know the tools available for you to overcome these things. You want to know what God has made available. So, and if you are not a believer, you can still relate with this book too, because there's something in it for you. Believe me when I say that. Okay, so the book At Work, like the title says, just goes to give us a robust knowledge of the shape of our art and the work that has been done and still has to be done, depending on the place where your art is at the moment. Okay, so this book written by PDDK actually started off as a course. So there is actually a course on artwork. So I have a particular friend that tells me constantly I do not like to read. Like, not that I don't like to read, but I just don't feel up to it and all. I think everyone should relate with this. So you're in the category of that, my friend. Please relate with the artwork course. I think you would see it in the Firebrand School of Ministry. Just if you can just put in your search engine the artwork course, that will take you there. Yeah, but then let's have a review of this amazing book. Okay, so this book starts off by describing or explaining robustly about the human art. Okay, so first starts off by letting us know that just the way as human, we have three, we're tripartite in nature, where we have the spirit, we have the soul, we have the body. Your body is this physical part of you that we see that relates or interface with the earth realm, okay? While the soul is the seat of our emotions. It's that place where your subconscious and your conscious mind sits. It's that place where your intellect also sits. However, the spirit is that place where you have your conscience, you have your intuition, and that's also the place, I'll say, communion occur, right? That conscience is that thing in you that says, that lets you know that this thing is wrong, this thing is right. Okay, yeah, that's your conscience. Your intuition is, I think I'll say, that part that you how you just have a feeling, it's that part of you that relates with how do I put it now? I'm looking for the right word, where something you just know, they're just annoying, all right? While the communion part of that, your spirit, is that part of you that you use, or do I say that relates, or God relates with, okay? So body, soul, spirit. And then she goes ahead to when she, after explaining robustly about the human art, all right, then she moves on to describe the types of art. She actually described 3 types of art: the natural art, the carnal art, and the spiritual art. She goes to explain how the natural heart, or the natural man, is that man that hasn't had contact with Jesus Christ. The person hasn't given his life to Jesus. So that kind of person, or that kind of heart, cannot discern spiritual things, because the person is still in that old Adamic nature, right? But then the moment a person gives his life to Christ, all right, the person can then move to the carnal art, all right, is that art that is now given to Jesus Christ, all right. However, there are still areas that are not yet, where Jesus is not Lord yet. Let me put it that way, because by the time we were saved, it is that spirit that gets transformed. No, let me not use the word transformed. That is changed. That sinful nature and that old man, that old nature, is taken away, and then a new art that is now that has the nature of God is now given. Okay, all right. And then she moved on from the carnal man to the spiritual man. That's that man that has been transformed. Be ye transformed, do not conform to this world, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Okay, so that man is now moving on from carnality into spirituality, becoming like God. All right, so she explained that, all right. Then she moved on to how we can overcome the carnal man. How can we overcome carnality? All right. And then she goes ahead to explain. In fact, she spoke in this book about 15 areas of carnality, that the carnal man, that kind of describes the carnal man. There are so many of them: deception, greed, fear, why am I stuck? But there's so many of them: betrayal, rebellion, But the good part, or what I'd say that stood out for me with this book is, you read some book, they just point out the problem, or they'll point out what the challenge is. But then this book points out the areas of carnality and the antidote to those areas, how we can navigate, how the fruit of the Spirit can really help us, to navigate, and then we can be transformed. That you would see in this book. Then she goes to explain to help us understand that sinful nature. She also helps us to understand how the enemy seeks to assail Christians, like how devil, how he assails Christian. Okay, let me just go ahead and open. So she seeks to help us understand the flesh, and the strengths of the flesh, and how we can overcome those strengths, right? Sin, the world, and the devil. And she then goes to explain how we can outwit the devil, how we can be ahead of him. Sometimes when we don't know these things, like I said earlier, ignorance is really not an excuse. When we don't know that this is the works of the enemy, or this is the enemy trying to keep us in a place where we do not understand our authority in Christ and all, then he's able to take advantage. All right. So, but then when the enemy is exposed, in fact, there's a particular school of discipleship, that the three aim of the discipleship course is to let you understand, knowing yourself, knowing the enemy, and knowing the weapon of our warfare. Okay, like know yourself, know the enemy, then know the weapon of our warfare. Because when we do not know these things, the enemy can really just be on the background, pretend like he's not there, and then keep manipulating our lives. Okay, so that was one of the things this book seeks to help us understand. The book also helps us to understand how we can overcome these schemes. There's so many of those schemes. I think she mentioned about 10 of them. All right, but then she mentioned how we can also overcome the schemes of the enemy. And then she goes on to speak about the Father's love. She described the art of God. Okay, and she used one example. She used an example. One of the examples she used was a story of the prodigal son and his father. And that was a really, it was an amazing example. And then she, like I said, she describes the art of the Father towards us. She described the nature of the Father, how that He is love, how that He is light, how that He is mercy. So a good number of the attributes of God's art she described in this book. Then she also describes how God helps us to grow into maturity, how God prunes us, how the things God does to our hearts to mature us. All right, so after describing God's heart, she goes to then describe how we can be a man after God's heart. And you know how when the Bible says that those who worship God must worship in spirit and in truth, because the Father seeks such to worship Him. So God is constantly searching for people with the heart that He can reach, with the heart that He can touch, with the heart that He can, pour His own heart that seeks to know what His own will is. So this is the kind of heart God is looking for. So this book goes to let us know how we can be men and women after God's heart. And then she gave a difference between clean heart and pure heart. To be honest, before now, I didn't know there was a difference. I thought they were the same, like clean heart, clean, pure. What's the difference? But then she goes to explain how clean heart is a heart that is devoid of works of the flesh. Okay? Where you will not see strife, you will not see all of these things that was described, I think, in the book of Galatians. Yes, those attributes. So the heart is devoid of such heart is filled with fruit of the Spirit, where you see love, you see joy, you see peace. These things that are the attributes of the Father's heart, you would see in a clean heart, a heart that is devoid of guile, devoid of deception, and all of those things. And then a pure heart is a heart that is centered on God. Like a pure heart is a heart that is centered on God. Like there is no plan B. The heart is not divided like on God and on another thing. You see this when Jesus was saying that you cannot have two masters. You either love one and hate one, or hate one and love the other. So a pure heart is a heart that is solely God is the only option. God is the only one. Only God has that heart. Okay, can you see the difference now? One is devoid of dead works, is devoid of the works of the flesh, and then filled with the fruit of the Spirit. That's a clean heart. While one is the other one that is centered on God. Okay, who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? He that has clean hands and a pure heart. That means there is just that singleness of sight, like only God. All right. So, but if you want details, you should go ahead and read this book. And then she touched on how we can then begin to grow, because the truth is we're supposed to move from glory to glory as we're renewed, we're transformed. All right. So she talked about God's pruning system, what God will do to the heart of a believer so that we are more and more like the person of Christ. Okay, so this is one book you want to relate with. You can also recommend it for your friends, because sometimes you look when you look around us, when we look around us, you know, you look at the church settings, you look at how sometimes you say we are saved, still behave, and you're like, what's happening right here? And some people are even ignorant of it for the most part. So a book like this will kind of, you know, bring them to that consciousness that yes, you are saved, but there is still that progressive part to it where we need to grow into spiritual maturity, where we need to grow into the person of Christ. All right. So at work is that book you want to read. Yeah. I promise you that it's not going to be a waste of your time, and it would really, really transform you. And the book is filled with scriptures. Everything that has been said here is backed by scriptures. All right. So thank you so much for your time. Do subscribe. If you haven't, do follow and relate with this content. They will really be a blessing to you. God bless you.